the second part of our seminar today. It's a little bit different. So the first half we heard about on three speakers. Thank you for that, about their journeys, the lessons learned, how they see the future in terms of the work that they're doing. And now we're going to hear from different people, different organizations that they're also working towards improving the air quality in our city. Our first speaker is Oliver Lott. Oliver leads the Clean Cities campaign in the UK, which is a network campaign across Europe to get polluting cars out of cities. Before this, he worked with scientists at the Environmental Defence Fund as part of their local clean air initiative, and also spent several years as a city official and transport planner. So lots of experiences, lots of things to share. Thank you, Oli, for being here today.
Thank you. How do I do this one? Okay, great. I came here today. Firstly, it's a privilege to be here. Congratulations to ERG. I wanted to give you some insight into some of the campaigning we've been doing. We've been trying to bring a lot of data and research to life that is often published, but we want to turn it into action as charity workers and campaigners. I work for Transport and Environment. It's a big NGO based out of Brussels. It's been going quite hard to phase out the internal combustion engine, particularly at a European Commission sort of level, but we've also set up a campaign called Clean Cities Campaign, which I run here in the UK, and it's based on these 4 pillars around getting polluting cars out of cities, and we do that by reallocating public space, encouraging people to walk and things like that. So with the short time I've got, I was just going to introduce you to 2 or 3 campaigns that I've worked on, not only at Clean Cities, but also Environmental Defence Fund, who we worked with academics when we helped to initiate the Breathe London project way back when. So one of the first campaigns we ran on, which was called Mayor for Clean Air. So this was going back to the last mayoral election campaign, and we started with the premise that the health burden of London's dirty air is not equal. And we use that as our mission statement that we were going to run on as campaigners, and we wanted to prove this to people using data that was there, and also using it, using that data in engaging ways. So I gathered together a group of health workers, MedAct, teenage activists, Choked Up, parents, Mums for Lungs, you've heard from Claire, and scientists at Environmental Defence Fund, and we started to dig into the data, and we had a model actually that was being developed through the original Breathe London network, and we were finding, and it won't come to a surprise to you, that more deprived people live in areas of high pollution. You're much more likely to live in an area of high pollution, and the same applies depending on your ethnic background as well. So we took that data, we gathered it all into an evidence base that we published ahead of the election, and we also were very fortunate to have an air pollution sources model that we could actually publish online and allow the public and campaigners to engage with and actually click on it and understand the sources of pollution in their area. And most importantly, and I realised where I'm actually standing right now when I put this photo in the slide deck, get us out of this hell, rehouse us now. This is when the Westway was first being built. And, the reason we're doing all this campaigning and gathering all this data is because of issues like this. 40 years of hell. So we used a lot of this data to start to shine a light on the arterial road network in London, which is to a lot of nerds affectionately known as the Red Route network. And we were shining a light of how much this hasn't really changed. It's really hurting people's health and damaging their health. And the snapshot here on the right is actually Vauxhall. You can just see the swathes of space given over to polluting cars from when we first designed our city, we didn't first design it, but when we were designing it back in the 70s, and how little space there is for bicycles, meanwhile in Paris. And then we published this report called Rethinking the Red Routes, but we really made sure this was very much ingrained in a lot of the data that was available. So for example, we looked into the proportion of primary schools near those roads in all the different boroughs using local authority data, looking at the pollution levels as well, the model pollution from the red routes, and starting to even understand how much of the pollution from those roads was actually attributed to the levels of concentration near those roads as well. So it wasn't just about the people living or moving directly on those roads, but how those roads were actually affecting the health of communities nearby as well. And then we started to get quite creative with an agency and started to think about how do we actually get the public on side. So we started putting up fantastic billboards, such as this one in Putney, which was on a red route, and then the lungs started to change and react with the pollution in the air and made some noise. And we got Choked Up involved as well, who came up with this fantastic idea of doing a guerrilla campaign with a road sign. But I wanted to make sure that a lot of that was also baked in the science and the evidence that we had. So we did the calculations. And as you can see there, the most deprived communities live with 22% more air pollution than the least. Obviously, air pollution is a catch-all, but when you're a campaigner, you've kind of got to go from NO2, nitrogen dioxide, to air pollution when you're talking to the public. And we took it online as well, and we started to calculate that it was these roads, these red routes in London, that would be some of the last areas in the UK to meet the air pollution limits that we're breaching. And then more recently, I've been doing some campaigning around the local elections using a different type of data set. And I suppose I put this in here because it's not just all about the scientific and air quality data, it's also about other data sets available to you through local authorities. And I brought together another coalition. We call ourselves Clean Air Wins, ahead of the local elections. And we wanted to talk about bikes. And especially, where do you keep them? Many of you might be cyclists here. I'll be very interested to know where you get to keep your bike, because more often than not it's a real struggle. And we developed a campaign called This Is Awkward, and this was based again on data though. Like we got in touch with local authorities through freedom of information. We were interested to know how many Londoners are waiting for a space in one of these lovely bread bins on the street, and we found out it was actually 60,000 people waiting, and many of them for years. So we really we did our best to get in touch with everyone, especially through social media. We're like, where do you keep your bike at the minute? How awkward is it for you? And by heck, did we find out that it was really awkward, and some people even keeping them in their wardrobe, which must get a bit messy in the winter. So we plastered a lot of that. We started to look into the data. We looked at not only how many people are on waiting lists in the boroughs, but we also looked at the difference in cost of putting your bike in a bike hanger compared to parking a car, for example, on the street. And even in places like Islington, it's far more expensive to use one of these hangers with a space than it is to park a car for an entire year, which we just found absolutely awkward. And then we also made sure that throughout this campaign we were putting out the data and the research and the evidence as well. So we worked with an independent research group to make sure we collated all that data, consolidated it, put it on maps, and put it out in an engaging research report, so that we had the credibility to go with it. And we kicked up a fuss, and we managed to get many more spaces committed. But watch this space, there's a progress report coming out tomorrow on a lot of this. And then finally, with the time I've got left remaining, I just wanted to talk about another campaign that we started and continue to work on with Mums for Lungs, about how do we get diesel out of the city, and especially if we're to meet these new WHO targets for nitrogen dioxide, which is a toxic gas that many of you will be familiar with. We initiated a campaign called The End of Diesel Fumes, and again, the sorts of data we were using in this was not only the levels of nitrogen dioxide in the city, the levels that are coming out of diesel cars causing that nitrogen dioxide, but also where are these diesel cars, how many are there, where are they being used. And we started to find through requests to the government and local authority data that London drivers are actually starting to ditch these diesel cars much quicker now than the rest of the country. And in fact, we can also see that through fuel sales data as well. And a lot of that is obviously related to massive schemes like the ultra low emission zone, and also a lot of the initiatives that boroughs are introducing through, for example, their parking permit regime as well. So we set up this brand new campaign called The End of Diesel Fumes, and we started to do this as a bit of a celebration. We know we can do this. We got the names of primary schools up there on the main stage, and you can see here Jemima from Mums for Lungs with the leader of Lambeth Council, who looked to commit to this campaign throughout the local election sort of manifesto writing. And then finally, to say that I kind of coupled this working with Imperial College and the ERG, looking at the impact of City of London's zero emission street that they had under the Barbican, which actually banned effectively zero diesel vehicles from going through it. And then it kind of ended again because some of the residents kicked off that some of their deliveries hadn't quite got to them because of miscommunication and what have you. Meanwhile, we're tearing our hair out because actually pollution levels started to go up again. So we worked with the EIG, we got a report out, we started to kick up a fuss about that. Now I'm sorry to say that scheme is not back in, but we're still we're gunning for it and hoping that either that will continue in a different form, or we'll start to talk about zero emission areas, which are very much needed in the centre of the city. And then finally, Claire might have mentioned, but we also set up London's first diesel pollution ward, which was also baked in a lot of the data that I've been talking about earlier, whether that's the air pollution data or hospital and NHS data, depending on how many kids are actually being admitted to a hospital with asthma at the minute. So hopefully that was a bit of a whirlwind of inspiration from a campaigner's perspective, just to kind of put a plea out there, keep going with the research, the data, it will get used, we'll do it in inspiring ways, and together we can make a lot of change. Thank you.